Fascinating. You know, in recent years, we've seen Chinese Coast Guard and naval vessels, in addition to aircraft, ramping up incursions into Japanese waters and airspace, particularly in the East China Sea near the disputed Senkaku or Diaoyu Islands.
Right.
Some analysts believe that Beijing's trying to wear Tokyo down and change the status quo in these disputed areas. Do you know what Professor Vogel's views were on how Japan and China could address this situation and maybe even lower the temperature?
Uh, the, the, there is something that in the book, sort of historically, that Japan had mishandled the situation. When the Japan had a change of parties in early 2000, and the Senkaku Islands were, according to all the documents the Japanese have, are Japanese sovereign territory, but they were privately owned. An individual actually owned the islands, and there was actually a factory on the islands for some time. When relations got dicey in the Jiang Zemin period, the mayor of Tokyo, Ishihara, who was a right-wing nationalist, offered for the Tokyo city government to buy the islands from this individual who owned them. And the last thing the Japanese government needed was for Ishihara to buy the islands. There was evidently a behind-the-scenes discussion between the Japanese and the Chinese that the Japanese government would try to get the islands from the individuals, so there was no danger of their getting into the hands of right-wing extremists. Then the cabinet changed, the political party changed, and it was very poorly handled, and the Japanese central government did buy the islands. That has been in all of the newspapers, and all the Chinese would also say that Japan nationalized the islands, which is the wrong way to think about it. Japan always regarded it as Japan's sovereignty. It's just that they were owned by an individual. But anyway, that was screwed up. And Ezra documents that in the book. How to handle it going forward? I don't think anybody, if anybody knew the secret, they would do it. I think Ezra's position on this was that disputing those islands is a sign of other problems in the relationship. That if the relationship were a good relationship and regarded by both sides as being valuable, that would not become sort of the central point. And Deng Xiaoping was willing to say, okay, we've got these islands, but future generations are going to be smarter than we are. Let's let the future generations worry about that. We won't worry about that. It was very clever. He was a clever man. But now the Chinese are becoming even more provocative. Actually, I was in the middle of the conversations with Ezra, and then he passed away. I think one problem on the Chinese side is that there's the illusion. China looks like it's an autocracy, but I think that's kind of an illusion. I think there's a lot of factionalism in the Chinese party, and right now in China, nobody gets criticized for bad mouthing the United States. Just like in the United States, nobody gets criticized for bad mouthing China. You get criticized if you praise China in the United States right now. That sort of takes some of the heat off the Japanese-Chinese relationship. But you could easily have the military, and I think the organization of the military in China, of the Coast Guard and the actual Navy and so forth, is a little bit blurred. You could have somebody in the military take a stab at the islands, and it could get out of control. The thing is not to let it get out of control on the Japan side. A lot of my, I don't know, it'd be good to have this conversation with Ezra. I was having dinner with some fairly high-placed Japanese the other night, and it was sort of the consensus around the table that in Xi Jinping's time, which he anticipates being the head of the government until 2035, that during that time, he will take back Taiwan. And he'll do it with threats, but without actually a war. That was the view. It's kind of hard to believe. And that could be the same with the Senkaku Islands. I don't know. They're just pieces of rock. I don't know why. They're hardly even a meaningful symbol.
In January of last year, the U.S. and Japan celebrated the 60th anniversary of their alliance, the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security. What did Professor Vogel think Washington and Tokyo needed to do today to meet our present challenges?
But one thing, Ezra he did have a position in the Clinton administration in the 90s, and he was instrumental, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the change in global power. He was instrumental in rewriting, along with Joe Nye, the security treaty as it stands now. I think I didn't necessarily talk with him in detail about the security treaty, and I think he and I sort of had some disagreements on the importance of the security treaty, and do we really need 45,000 troops in Japan? I would question that. I would question whether the burden on Okinawa. But I think he regarded the security treaty as very important. I think he regarded himself as one of the authors of the modern security treaty as it currently stands. I think one thing that Ezra, though, always worried about was through the security treaty and the activities of the Seventh Fleet, which is our fleet in the Western Pacific, that we not give a false sense of courage or confidence to the Taiwanese. Have the Taiwanese think that America would inevitably back them up if they took some initiative. That was something that was worried him, especially in the early 2000s in Taiwan. But especially with one of the good things, I think, to come out of either the Trump administration or the Abe administration is that people in the United States recognize that the relationship with Japan is important. And I think that's a good thing.